Hey, everybody, welcome in. Perfect. Yeah, thank you for joining us. This is going to be, I think, Tanisha's first a standard paint night with us, a Monday night paint night. And she'll be teaching us this awesome little gnome. So just before we get started, Tanisha is going to be using a pattern, and the pattern should have been on your supplies. So make sure that you have the pattern, because I know sometimes people kind of glance through their painting supplies and they don't necessarily have that. So take a minute to get that, get some transfer paper, all that you need to do this, and then you can kind of paint along with Tanisha. But again, if you guys do paint this, we do look on Facebook and Instagram to see what you guys paint. So we'd love to see you share your creation. If you do have any questions, I'll be in the chat, and then it'll be in the chat so we can help you out. We always try to go slow, but I know that we end up going a little bit faster than some people end up painting, but that's what that recording is there for. And you can always go back to it. But we're happy to pause along the way if a bunch of people want to kind of take a step back. So anyways, hope you guys enjoy it tonight, and I'll hand it over to Tanisha.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tanisha. I have taught a class here on Michael's before in Drizzle, and like Dylan said, this is the first time that I've done a standard painting. So like the image in the listing, this is the little gnome painting that we're going to be doing today. And I had my color list up, and also like Dylan said, we had a pattern. The pattern is fairly simple. You can just download that, print it out, and then use transfer paper. So I'm going to show, let's go over some supplies. So in the list, you should have had a number of specific paints. I believe we have, let's see, 6, 7, 8 paints here. They're all FolkArt matte, and they're in specific colors. You can, of course, do a different color palette and it will still look amazing. But these are the colors that I used on this original one. We've got the pattern, which I just have on a thin parchment-like paper here. Transfer paper, and you can use any kind of transfer paper. It doesn't matter the color or anything like that. This one is a carbon based type. I've got some paper plates just to put my paint on. So this is going to be my palette. I've got a bunch of brushes, some paper towels, and I have some baby wipes just for my hands for when we get messy, and a pencil. And hopefully that's all I will need for this one. So like always, we love hearing your comments. So if you have any questions, any comments, if you want to just let us know where you're watching from, please feel free to use the chat. Dylan will relay anything that I don't see myself, and he will let me know questions and stop me and have me go back and things like that. So I am here today in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Plaid crafting studios. You may have seen me before on places like Amazon, Facebook, that kind of thing with Plaid. And today we're doing this cute little painting. So gnomes are super popular right now. I'm sure you have seen them all over the place in all types of holidays and themes, and anything you can think of, they have a gnome for it these days. So this was closer to summer when I did this one. So he's a bit summery, springy. You could very easily change this into, you know, a fall-based gnome. You could do leaves instead of flowers. You could do little mushrooms, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to show you kind of the basics of a cute little gnome painting like this. And then if you want to keep going with that and do them in a different theme, we would love to see that. So let's get ready here. So first of all, we're just going to transfer this image. So the way you do that is you're going to take your pattern and you're going to take your transfer paper. So I'll just take out a piece of transfer paper here. And I have already got mine taped down, so you'll have to pretend with me here. I'll show you on the back of this one. And these wood palettes already had a base coat of what looks like weathered chalk paint on it. Dylan, did you have something?
Oh yeah, just a whitewash. Right.
A whitewash, yeah, correct. And if your piece of wood does not have a whitewash on it, you can do this really easily. One way is just to use some white paint on it, brush it on there, and then take a paper towel or some kind of wipe and wipe most of that away. You can do it that way, or you can use it, use white paint with a dry brush and just barely get it on there. There's a couple different ways to do it, but hopefully you guys got a piece of wood that already has a whitewash on it. So what you would do is you're going to take your piece of transfer paper. And first of all, you want to make sure you have the correct side. So I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm going to write on this side and see if it makes a mark underneath, and it did not. So this is the wrong side. So I'm going to flip it over. Just to double check, we're going to do a little mark on there, and you can see that there. Oh, well, maybe you can see it there. It just looks like a pencil mark there. So now we know that that's the correct side. So you can take that down and then tape down your pattern there. And then you just follow those lines with your pencil or any blunt object. You're just going to trace that around, right? And you don't need to put in all the little tiny details, just the main shapes there. And what you get, so this one I just taped down and I went ahead and traced it quickly. So now I'm going to untape it. And you'll see, well, I taped it too well. Hold on here.
As you're doing that, we had a question about if you want to go ahead and paint your wood now. Yes, if you have a piece that's not whitewashed already, you don't have to do it on top of white, but that is kind of the steps that we're following here. And if you're working on a canvas, that's fine too.
Yeah. I mean, you can really do this on anything, especially if this is kind of your first go around. We're just kind of getting in those basic shapes, and then you can do this again with the same pattern or change it up. Mm-hmm. So I have this basic shape here, and now I can just go in to kind of give people some more time. I can go in and sort of put out some of those. I can put in some more detail that we will have in the final painting, right? So we know we're going to have some little rosettes on his pants, his or her pants. Well, I guess it's a he with that big bushy beard. I'm just going to fill in some little circles here, sort of show where those little rosettes are going to go. We can maybe throw in some more details here. Make sure everything's the right shape that you want. And you're really just kind of sketching on whatever surface you're using. All right. You can clean that up as well. A little bit harder if you're using a, oh goodness. What's the word I'm looking for? What do people normally paint on?
A canvas.
Canvas. Erasing on a canvas is a little bit harder than erasing on wood, but it can be done. All right, so I'm just going to move things around a little bit here. Let's move this guy over here. And I'm going to get my plate. And one trick that I like using, oh, you know what? We're going to have to change the color of his hat because I did not grab a blue for some reason. So let's start with lavender. We're going to give him a purple hat. But if you have that blue that was in the instructions, you can go ahead and use that. Actually, maybe I should use the golden, maybe I should use the ochre. That'll give us a good fall look for his hat. That'll be nice. So right here, I'm using a 12 flat brush. Don't think it matters too much what brush you're using. This brush is probably a little soft for what I'm doing with it. We don't need too many details yet. And I'm just going to start filling in his hat with this ochre color. And I'm loading my brush pretty heavily. When you paint on wood, your paint does tend to get pretty sucked up pretty quickly. So you do need a good amount of paint on your brush. But you could also do this if you wanted to do it a little bit differently. You could also water down your paints and you would get more of a watercolor look on this. And that would also help your paint glide on the wood. We're going to go full color. So I'm just getting some of these big color areas blocked out. And when you paint, you want to think about your layers. So we want to paint the underneath before we paint the flowers, right? Because otherwise you would be going around your flowers. I mean, you don't have to, but that's the way I like to think about it. And also a nice part about painting on white, the way we are tonight, is that any mistakes, so where I went out of the lines here, when the painting is done, I can very easily go over that little mistake in white and it will disappear. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a smaller brush, actually, now that we're getting finicky. So I'm just going to grab a 6 flat. I love my flat brushes. They're my favorite ones to use, and I feel like they're the hardest to find. I don't know why. I guess they're not the most popular. Or maybe they are the most popular, and that's why I can never find any. I'm just going around my leaves. I'm filling in this hat, and you can always assume that you're going to need to do more than one coat of whatever color you're using to get that really nice filled in look. So don't worry if you're still seeing some of your pencil marks or anything like that. You will go back over it again. I'm glad to see some of you guys working on it. I'm sorry if I rushed through that, putting the stencil on. Dylan, do we have any comments or questions so far?
No, I think we've got a bunch of people painting along. We do have one person that said they're doing this for a gnome crazed friend, and I totally understand that. My mother is very into gnomes right now. I can't say that they're my favorite, but they're a huge thing right now.
I think I've told you, Dylan, I think we've talked about gnomes a few times. I do have garden gnomes. Mm-hmm. That's the extent of my gnomes.
Yeah,
so
I feel
far.
like they fit very well there, you know?
Yeah, I do like garden gnomes. But I also am very into my garden, so I put weird things in my garden. I also have a little goat statue, which I love. I used to have real chickens in my yard, but not anymore. So now I just need to fill it with gnomes. All right, so that was the first layer on his hat. And while we let that dry, let's go ahead and put our first layer on his beard. And with that, we're going to use the Parchment, which I love this color. I don't know what it is about this color, but I do really like it. It's just a very nice neutral. And we're not going to worry about the details just yet. Again, we're just color blocking in. So we're going to go right over these little hairs that we put in there. You can still sort of see them through your paint, so that's fine. And they're really just guidelines to sort of show the direction of his beard. And actually, I believe in the stencil, we didn't have those lines, so that is fine as well. The beard is putting the directional hairs is a very fun part of this painting. So we'll get to that. But for now, we're just going to sort of messily fill that in. That's all we had to do, just like that. And all of that three-dimensional look that you see in his beard will come from us putting strokes of other colors. All right. So now let's go ahead and I'm going to take my vintage tea rose. And I'm actually going to mix it. Oh, I already have some. I'm just going to take some of this parchment. I'm going to mix in a tiny bit of that vintage tea rose until we get kind of a neutral pink, because the tea rose is a little dark for his nose, but it will be perfect for the flowers. So let's just start with a good neutral pink to paint his nose. And of course, you can always, he can be a different race of gnome if you prefer. That's his only skin showing, so do what you will with that. He would be cute in any color. And again, we're just color blocking that out. That's what we're going to do for all of this. Let's just get one coat down first, and then we're going to go back in and fuss with it all. Okay. Now for the pants, let's maybe lighten up some of that parchment. A little bit of my white, which is titanium white. And we'll take some of that parchment. And we'll just mix up a bit. Really, this part of it doesn't matter. I'm just kind of doing this so it doesn't blend in too much with the beard right away, so we don't get confused. Use a little bit of a bigger brush. This is a 10 flat. And we're just going to put in his little legs here. And when I was doing my stencil, the wood grabbed at my pencil a little bit and kind of made some wobbly leg lines, and that is totally fine. We can fix that up with when we go around and use our white paint to you know, fix up our lines and things like that. All right, easy peasy. And now to do the boots, I'm going to go ahead and take my brown, which I believe in the list is a coffee bean brown. In front of me, I've actually got a bark with a B brown, which is very close. So any brown will do. And we're just going to take some of that ochre, some of that brown, and maybe a teeny bit of white. Trying to make a good base color, so that's a little too yellow. So I'm going to take a little more of that brown in. Maybe grab a little more white, maybe a little bit of that parchment. Kind of neutralize it a little bit. There we go. Now we're getting to a good color. Switch out my brush again. Let's grab, I'm going to go back to my 6 flat. Let's grab some of that paint. And color block out his little boots. And when we come back to that, we'll throw in the shadows, which will make it look like his little legs are going into the boots. Really, these kind of illustrative pieces, it's really in those details that kind of make it pop. So that's the fun part, because you can start to see it become sort of three-dimensional. Becomes a little walking cartoon. All right, and now I'm going to take some of the vintage tea rose, which is another one of my favorite colors. And I'm going to take that straight, no mixing, and I'm going to go ahead and block out this larger rosette. And like I said, oh, go ahead.
Do you remember what size your little wood panel is?
You know, I want to say it says on the listing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
don't.
it looks like a 12 by 6 or something like that, in case you're curious.
Yeah, probably about that, or 12 by, I would say maybe about 12 by 4.
Yeah.
Pretty rectangular. I actually really like how this color palette's working with this ochre in the hat. It's going to look nice, I think.
Yeah, that's super cute.
All right, and then I'm going to take, what was that, light lavender to do the medium rosette. And then let's just mix up. We'll take some of that lavender, some of the rose, and a little bit of the parchment. Let's mix that up and see if it gives us a third color. And that should go perfectly since it's made of the two colors. That's always a good trick. If you don't know what goes with two colors, just mix them together and find out. I guess unless they're two primaries, then you might run into some trouble. All right, and then I'm just going to take my lighter green, which is the Clover. I'm going to take a smaller brush. Let's see, this is a 2 flat. Load that up, and I'm just going to fill in my little leaves here. And if you are if you paint quite a bit, you may already know how to make one stroke leaves with a particular brush. And if you want to do that, that is fine as well. You can do it however you want to do it. The idea is to practice and have fun. Not everything comes out the way you want it, and that is a-okay. We learn something every time we try. Okay, and then let's not forget our teeny tiny little leaves over here hanging on a vine. All right. So now we have everything color blocked in. So now we're just gonna go back through and put a second coat where it's needed. And I say that because I don't think we need a second coat on the beard and maybe not on the pants, because both of those will be getting second coats in the way of details. So I'm just going to take more of my ochre and go through and give this cute little hat a second coat. And again, don't worry too much on your lines, because you can go back over with white and fix everything up in the end, which we will do together. Let us know in the chat if this is your first Michael's class that you've done, or your first one with plaid that you've ever done. We do these, what, twice a week, Dylan?
Yeah, so generally we have about 2 classes a week. We'll have Monday night paint night and usually like a Wednesday general craft one. And we've got Tanisha will show you the project, but this Wednesday at 3, we're going to have Chris on painting a cute little festive fall painting, and she'll show you that at the end here. We do have a few people saying that this is their first, so welcome in, you guys.
Oh, that's so exciting. And I said at the beginning of the class, technically this is only the second that I've taught here on Michael's. I've done lots of lives with plaid on different platforms. And I have taught one drizzle class here on Michael's. And then I've moderated a few, which is what Dylan's doing for me now.
Yeah.
And I'm just spinning around my canvas. Don't be afraid to move the canvas when you need to. When you paint, you should never have to tweak your arms or your hands or your fingers to paint where you need to. You should move the subject towards you. And it's hard to remember to do that sometimes when you're knee deep in a drawing or painting, but it is to get into those corners. It's good to just move around your piece, which may look a little funny on camera, but it helps.
And what was the color combo that you used for the pants, Tanisha?
The pants were, I believe we did the parchment and a little bit of white.
Perfect.
Just to lighten it up a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to the color that I mixed for the boots, which was brown, ochre, and white, or parchment, I think. I'm just going to give him a second coat. Oops. Made a little mistake there. That's okay. We'll go back and fill it in with white. Let's give his nose a little second coat. I just have a tiny bit of that left. I might have to mix up some more. And we'll go ahead and give those rosettes a second before we put in the details. And you can see now that these colors are really starting to pop now that we've done our second coat. And I may even go back in and do a third coat on the hat just because it's our largest swath of color. So I want it to look really even. Let's touch those leaves one more time in our lighter green, which was Clover. Oops, brush is a little wet. So when you wash your brushes, you want to make sure that you have paper towels nearby, because what happens is even if your brush seems dry, sometimes a little bit of water will come down through the metal piece that holds your bristles in, and you'll get a drop of water in your paint. So it's good to have some paper towels nearby so you can double check and double dry them. All right, this is starting to look good. All right, so while the hat is drying, I can tell that it's still a little bit tacky. I'm going to keep letting that dry so we can do a third coat on that. But while that's drying, let's start putting in some of our details. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my palette plate. Kind of start over because we're going to be mixing a couple colors. So let's start with the beard. So we're going to get some brown, some parchment, and some white. And for this, we're going to use a couple techniques, and we're going to kind of go over it a few times. So don't worry about this part of it too much, because it's almost like the more you fuss with it, the better it starts to look. So first of all, let's put in some shadow. So actually, I'm going to save that brush so I can dry brush. So I'm just going to take any brush so that we can do some mixing. So I'm going to take some of my dark brown, and I don't need it that dark brown, right? We kind of want to neutralize it a bit. So I'm going to take that parchment, and I've sort of accidentally got a little bit of ochre on my brush already, which is fine. Okay, so we've got that, and then let's take some of that we mixed and make an even lighter pile. So now we have two mixed colors to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bristly, what is this called? This is called a 1/4 scruffy. So it's just kind of a, I don't know how to explain a scruffy brush. It's just scruffy. So we're going to take a little bit of that. I'm just going to kind of pounce it on there So I'm not really loading the brush a ton. And I'm going to start up under his hat and under his nose because that's where most of the shadow is going to be. And we're just going to pull it down. I hope you guys can see that. I'm just sort of putting my brush down and kind of pulling it down directionally, sort of how hair would bush out. So we're kind of making like a little bush on his face.
Tanisha, will you hold that up for a second to the camera?
Yeah.
So everybody can get kind of a.
So it's not pretty yet.
Yeah.
But
Just
you can
kinda get
see
an
I'm
idea
just
of it.
kind of getting the color in there. And once I get in there, I'm pulling it downwards. And we're going to even all that out and kind of play with it as we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I want to get some kind of under his nose. So I'm sort of just pouncing it like I'm maybe doing a stencil. Okay. And then we also want some darkness kind of on the bottom of his beard. We're just creating some three-dimensional space. So on the sides, bottom, and underneath. Okay, and then I'm gonna use that same brush. I'm gonna take that a little bit lighter color. And again, I'm just pulling down. We're just kind of creating direction here. And we're gonna use a couple different brushes too to sort of make this happen. It's kind of a trial and error and kind of a building up layers. Okay. So then let's go, let's see, what kind of brush? Maybe a bit of a smaller brush, let's say a 2 flat. And I'm going to take a bit of parchment and mix it with a bit of white. So we're sort of creating highlights now. And I'm going to go ahead and load that brush. I'm not pouncing anymore. I'm loading it up pretty good. And we're just going to create directional hairs. And I'll show that up close too. So we're just kind of blobbing that in for now. We're sort of starting with bigger brushes and we'll go down to smaller, finer in our layers. Okay, and then let's use like a really fine brush. And we'll get some of that dark. And I'm sort of going to offload it a good bit. And then kind of just pull down from those shadowy areas.
Some little whiskers.
Little whiskers. You can also you can see that I'm sort of pulling up from the bottom as well. So you can create direction and create dimension in both directions. And then maybe let's do like a little wash. I want to add a little bit of warmth into his beard. So let's mix a color. We're going to take a tiny bit of that ochre, a good bit of the parchment, maybe some of that white. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water to it just by sticking my brush in my water. Kind of thin it out, offload that a good bit. And then I'm just going to kind of like go, oh, I may have gone a little heavy there. That's okay. We're going to keep going. Okay. Now let's leave that for a second and go back to his hat. Let's see, what brush was I using? I'll pick up my 12 flat. We need some ochre again. And this should be our last coat on this hat, just so we get a nice even look. This color lends itself so well to almost looking like a soft fabric,
It does look very rich.
doesn't it?
So that's, you know, how easy this is. If you guys were coming into the holiday season, you could easily swap the hat color out and swap out whatever you paint as far as the little
Yes.
floral patch. You can make this into more of a holiday or winter gnome. This is kind of a cool little pattern to keep in your back pocket.
I agree. I mean, you could really go full on Christmas with this, or Hanukkah, with just a change of the color palette and a quick idea on what to do for the little baubles. Got a little fly that wants to come paint with us. You could also, I suppose, customize this for someone's favorite colors. So the person who was saying they were here for a gnome lover, you could find out what their favorite colors were. And I mean, you know, what's funny is you could even do this for sports. You could do a little football gnome, which is something we've been talking about in the studio a bit. We just did some tailgating projects. Not exactly something that we're very well versed in, but we came up with some cute stuff. All right. I think that about does it for his hat. Okay, now let's do his nose. So I'm going to take that vintage tea rose, and I do want to neutralize that a little bit. Maybe I'll use some parchment for it. And this is for creating the shadow underneath here, just to show a roundness in his nose. So I'm just comparing the paint that I'm mixing to his current color to make sure that I'm going a shade darker. So otherwise you won't be able to see it. All right, let's try that. And basically I'm just carving out a little rounded line on the bottom of his nose. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to rinse out my brush a little bit and take that wet brush, and I'm just going to kind of fuzz out that line, just blend it out a little bit so that it's more shadow-like. And you can go back in too and do this more and more to your liking. You can make it look really, really rounded if you wanted to. I think that's good for now. So now he looks like he has a little bit of a rounded nose there. Now we can go in and put some, let's put some details in our flowers. So again, we're just going to use those same two colors, the purple and the pink, and we're just going to kind of mix them up to create some detail there. So I'm just going to take this light lilac, I believe it was called, and I'm just going to go ahead and make some C brush strokes and some backward C's to create sort of the idea of petals. So can you guys see that? And we'll go back in again and add some other colors. So now I'm just going to pick up my vintage tea rose. I'm not even going to wash my brush. I'm just going to grab some of that. And in this one, I'm going to do just some smaller C's and backward C's to create that idea of petals. And then for my tiny one, let's see, let's make a little mix of rose and purple. Pick that up. And I could be using a smaller brush for this. That's okay. All right, and then I'm going to pick up some of my parchment again. I just have some here still on my plate. I'm going to use a smaller brush and put in some tiny highlights. So we don't want to be too heavy-handed with this. So I'm going to offload a bit. And I'm just going to kind of do, again, I'm just brushing on some C's, some C shapes. And you don't have to be, I'm not really thinking about light source or anything like that right now. This is just sort of a, you know, he's a little too cartoony to be thinking about that, I think. So we're just throwing in some highlights willy-nilly. Keep it sort of country looking. I think those are starting to get pretty flushed out. And I'm going to go back and work on his beard a little bit more. So I need to make, let's make another sort of neutralized beard color. Let's see, just going to mix up my parchment and my brown to get me a, just yet another brown. We want as much dimension in this as we can get. So I think, you know, putting in those layers of colors really helps. So I'm just going to take the brush I had in my hand, which was a 6 flat. And again, I'm just kind of, you know, putting in those strokes that are directional. We'll go in and we'll put in some little highlights, lowlights. And just keep on putting them in there until it looks like you're done. And just like I did before, you can take, you know, just a little bit of water or a really sort of washed out color. And you can kind of go on top of what you just did and kind of just fuzz those and blend those out a little bit. That worked well. And then I'm just going to go in and put a little bit more shadow. So I'm going to take that neutral color. Let's see if this will work as a shadow. It might be a little bit darker. Let's make that a little bit darker. Okay. I'm just going to come in underneath where there should be a shadow, and I'm just kind of putting that color in there, and then we'll drag it down with our wet brush. Just to blend that out. All right, that's starting to look good. All right, now let's do his little rosettes and polka dots. So I still don't have that blue. So what color? So the polka dots here match the hat. So let's do that. We'll do ochre polka dots. So I'm just going to go, I'm just taking my 0 round brush. This is just like a fine line brush. I'm just going to throw some polka dots in there just by touching my brush lightly to the wood. And of course, they don't have to be perfectly round or perfectly spaced or anything like that. You just kind of go in and fill out some space. And then we're going to put some larger little mini rosettes in there. Okay, so I just put some little polka dots on his legs. And while those little polka dots are drying, before we get in there to do our rosettes, let's put our detail in our leaves. And we are getting close to the end here. It's starting to look really good. I'm going to change out my plate one more time. And I'm going to use my darker green, which is Thicket. And I'm going to take a fairly small brush. Let's use that 2 flat. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to darken up 1/2 of the leaf. So you just draw a line down your leaf and fill in 1/2 of it. Just so it looks like it has a little bit of a curve, a little bit of a dimension. We're not getting too crazy with where our light's coming in or anything like that, but you can if that's your thing. I know when I draw certain things, I really like to think about that, but when I do things like this, I like to just kind of go with what looks cute. On these little leaves, it might be a little bit harder. And while we have this dark green out, I'm going to take a very fine brush. Let's see. What's the smallest one I have? Maybe this guy, which is a 0 round. And I'm going to, right now, my little vine that's hanging off of the hat is just from my parchment paper. It hasn't actually been painted yet. So I'm going to take this little brush and I'm just going to create this tiny little vine in that darker color. There we go. All right. So let's see, how's my hat doing? I think our hat's dry enough to add a tiny bit of shadow and highlight to it. So again, we're going to take a little bit of that parchment, a little bit of the ochre. We're going to mix that up. And I don't know if you can see in the original, let's see, right here, we just have a really light highlight just coming in like that. And then down here, we have a really fine shadow. Nothing crazy. We're not looking for, you know, a really dark shadow or a really strong highlight. So I'm just going to mix up a lighter ochre. Maybe thin it out a little bit with water. And then I'm just going to go whoop, whoop, whoop. I'm just bringing that in a tiny bit. So I'm just bringing in that highlight right there. Put a little highlight right there. Okay, and then we're going to take that. There's my little fly friend again. And then we want to make a little tiny shadow. So I'm going to take that ochre again and add the tiniest bit of brown to it. Offload that a good bit and come back in and bring in that little bit of shadow just to make it look like it's sitting on his head. It's actually a hat that exists somewhere in space, somewhere in three-dimensional space. Whoop. All right, and then in the original drawing, we did have a line right here that showed where the hat bent. So I'm going to throw that in with some brown. Just like that, really simple. All right, now let's do our rosettes. So I'm just going to take a 2 flat, take some of our vintage tea rose, and I'm just going to load it onto my brush and create a circle. So I'm just going to basically spin my brush around. And you can do that with any kind of small brush that is easier for you. You might have a way that you like making small circular objects. Let's see, how many did I have? About 4 on each leg on this one. I think I might do 3 on this one. So they don't have to be perfect or pretty. They're just little circles. And then we're going to take that lighter green. You can use the darker green as well, whichever you prefer. I'm going to take some, whoops, got a wet brush. Take some of that lighter green. And I'm just going to use sort of the tip of my brush and create, oh, I need a little bit more. Create some little, pretend little leaves coming off of there on one side of each rosette.
And if you'll give us a close-up of that once you're done.
Yeah.
So we can kind of get a good view.
So that's what that's looking like right now.
So it can be very simple.
Very simple. You're really just kind of giving the idea of a pattern, really. And on my original painting, I do have a tiny bit of detail inside the rosette. And I think all I did for that was I took my lavender, took my finest brush, and made some teeny tiny little C's in there to create those teeny tiny little petals. Oh, and you know what we haven't done yet is his boots. So I think his boots will be the last thing. So first, before we do that, I'm actually going to take my white and I'm going to clean up my mistakes. So I've got a mistake here that I'm just using my white paint like whiteout. Just going through, going over anywhere where my brush maybe skipped ahead a little bit without me. And the white should blend in well with your background if you're using that. And it also should work if you're working on something else. White paint cures all. All right. Okay, so for his boots, we're going to give it the same treatment that we gave everything else. We're going to do a little bit of highlight, a little bit of shadow. So first I'm going to take my brown without mixing it. And I'm just putting it on my flat brush. And I'm really just going to go through. If you look at my original one, I almost outlined the boots in the brown and created that curve. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again. And I may end up switching my brush. We'll see. Just kind of throwing some simple brush strokes in there just to kind of anchor these boots, to give them a little more shape. These are sort of little gnome Uggs, aren't they?
Didn't notice until now, but yes, definitely.
Got little Uggs on. You can kind of darken up those soles a little bit. Okay, so far I've just sort of outlined those guys. I'm gonna take that brown, I'm just gonna throw a tiny bit of parchment in it, just so it's not super dark. And we're gonna create our shadows that way. And again, I'm really doing this just very brush strokey. I'm not being super precise with it. Just kind of giving that illusion. And then I'm going to go in, I'm going to take some of that white, some of that parchment. Same brush. And we're just going to go in and we're going to create a couple little highlights coming in the other direction. Sort of fake some roundness. And then if you want, on the original painting, I did create a little bit of a ground that he's standing on. So we can do that real quick. I'm gonna use a scruffy brush and I'm just gonna use that parchment. Just kind of, I'm just sort of throwing my brush on there, not really creating lines. Just kind of giving him a little bit of a place where he's landed. And then of course, on the bottom right, or wherever you normally sign, you're going to want to sign your finished painting. So let's go back to our finest brush. If you have a Sharpie, even better. I'm just going to go like that. Whoop. All right, well, let's just pretend my signature looks good. And I think really that's it. I think we have two cute little gnomes here. I think that new color palette came out really well.
Love that.
Yeah, two little gnome friends.
Yeah, so just remember, if you guys have been painting along, we'd love to see your paintings. Please hashtag Make It With Michaels and Plaid Crafts. Feel free to come join us in our Let's Paint with Plaid Facebook group. That's where a lot of people end up coming and posting their photos. So we love hearing from you guys and getting some feedback on the painting classes. So thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Yeah, and let me just show this painting that's going to be our next class. And Dylan, am I still on overhead?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so our next class is this really cute apple pie painting, very simple on a small canvas. And it is Wednesday at 3 p.m. Central, and it's called Harvest Apple Pie. So this is great if you have, maybe your mom is really into the country living type look. This is a really cute painting that can be done in just a couple hours, and it'll be very fun. So I hope you guys join us for that. And yeah, thank you guys so much for sticking around with me and creating this gnome painting. Please tag us. We would love, love, love to see what you did. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night.
Thanks so much, you guys.